on. Sorry about that. We got it. We have started recording, just so everybody knows. I'm going to start over with this introduction. We have our special guest, Jon Baime, with us. He has made an amazing documentary, and we're going to interview him today and be in conversation about that documentary and how his life has been impacted by his own NPE. He found out 4 years ago that he's donor conceived, and his story is just amazing. And he has a lot to bring to the table to help us out as a community, because his bio is just amazing, extraordinary. He spent several decades with CNN, working as a producer on many shows that probably a lot of you know from that have seen them, like Small Town, Big Deal, Caffeine and Octane, to name a few. He's done some work also with the CDC on a series of web videos called Science Nature for the National Science Foundation. And he also produced segments for This American Land, a PBS series covering environmental issues. Jon, I am so excited you're here.
I am thrilled to be here.
We're happy to have you here, and that we've reached out to each other to be able to bring an amazing interview or conversation. And I want you to know that all the people that are here on this call, probably 95% have had an NPE. Either they're donor conceived, they didn't know about it, they're adoptees, they possibly didn't know that, late discovery adoptees, or as myself, I call it non-parental event, where my biological mother had an affair, and I had no idea that my father was out there, and I found out when I was 51. So my story is, in the sense, interesting, because I ended up getting some of the Jewish, like you are Jewish, and I had no idea that that I was Jewish. So that was an interesting little tidbit. I'm going to start asking some questions, and I had just had my questions up now, and I have to go. Somehow they have disappeared on me. So let me get back to them. I guess the first one, really, I'll just go ahead and ask you, talk to us about where we can see the film, the documentary, and where it's been distributed.
Thanks. First of all, I want to tell you it's really good to be here, and I got to give some shout outs to some folks in the on this Zoom. First is Ann Lerner. I see her name there. She's a friend of mine from the Metro Atlanta area, and also my brother Eric, who plays prominently in the film. I did a lot of interviewing with him. He's also here from a very cool, mellow, dry Delray Beach, Florida, where the sun is shining. About the film, it is released on Tuesday, the 15th of August. It can be seen on, right now you can pre-order it on Apple TV Plus, if you have that. On the 15th, on Tuesday, it'll be available on Amazon Prime. It'll be available on YouTube. It'll be available on something called Vudu, which I didn't know what it was a week ago, but now I love it. It'll also be available on most people's cable. If you have cable TV, you have on demand, you got a good shot at seeing it on demand. So there, it's widely available to anybody in the United States and even Canada. Some of the Canadian cable companies are going to be carrying it too. And I think Amazon and YouTube and Apple TV Plus are also available in Canada as well. So in North America, it's the big North American premiere.
That's amazing. I'm really excited for you, Jon, that you've got all these places that this is going to be distributed out. So one of my questions I have for you, I'm curious about, is how your family prior and then the new family that you got have been impacted by your story, and how can you describe with us also a little bit the positive and the negative issues that may have come up during filming with both sides of your new family and your older family, obviously?
Sure. First, I would say the issues that came up, the negative issue, really the biggest one was COVID. Trying to film around COVID. That was really the hardest part, was to get interviews straight, because you'd set up an interview and then you'd get an email, oh, I have COVID, we have to reschedule. And that didn't just happen once, that happened numerous times, present company included. So that was probably the hardest part. What surprised me the most, and what was so simple about it, was how everybody was just so willing to cooperate with it. My donor father, my two brothers I was raised with, Eric and David, all my donor siblings, I interviewed 5 of them. Not only that, but there are 3 surviving moms who, from my donor siblings, who were very willing to just be very honest and straightforward about their experiences, what their challenges were back in the late 50s, early 60s, and what they did to make the choice to do donor conception. And that was very enlightening for me.
Oh, that's interesting. How many new half siblings did you end up finding out about?
I would say originally it started out with 5 when I took the DNA test and I got the results, and there were 5 half siblings, thinking something was wrong with my computer, but there wasn't. But it's up to about 9 donor siblings when you start including the brothers I was raised with and the donor father's children from marriages. You're looking, I'm one of 18. I have no full siblings. I only have 18 half siblings. Obviously, the 2 brothers I was raised with, I consider them my brothers. But from a genetic standpoint, yeah, I'm one of 18. I like to think I'm pick of the litter.
I like that. You know, when you were working on your film, I've spoken to, just as an example, I've spoken to many people that are like authors that write books about their NPE journey. And I can almost say 100% they have articulated to me how much that process of writing that book meant to them and their journey through their writing process. Would you say you could relate to those authors while working on filling in the blanks? And can you talk about that process?
Sure, I can tell you that it was definitely a cathartic experience. Writing, producing, editing, the whole thing. One of the most cathartic things was the support I got that I mentioned before. Nobody really said no, which I was really impressed with. Now, there are donor siblings that I know about that have told us, yeah, you're our donor siblings. We don't want anything to do with you. That's fine. Obviously, I did not reach out to those people, but the ones I did reach out to, everybody said yes. So that, from number one, that support was incredible. When I finally broke the news to the rest of my family that I was making this, that includes relatives on my mother's side and my father's side, my father I was raised with, they were very supportive. And that also was very, very, just very encouraging. So I would say the most interesting part was actually all these years I've been telling other people's stories. Now, all of a sudden, I had a story to tell. And I like to think of my film as a character study. But it's really weird when you start doing a character study of yourself, which made it even more interesting. But in the end, I'm really happy with what I've produced. People who have seen it, who are NPEs, like, for example, I found a new donor sibling, and that person was a little freaked out when they found out. And she said, gee, this is just like something you'd see in the movies. And I said to her, well, speaking of, let me show you something. And I showed her a rough cut of the film, which she watched, I would say, at least a half dozen times. And very, very, she said, this just made it so much easier, to the point where I thought, gee, I wish I had somebody making a film when I found out. That would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's why we're so happy you did this. One of the things in discussing, your process and with what many of us here will relate to is that it's these secrets that our parents kept. Secrets fester, and knowing our truth is something that needs to be told. We all deserve to know our truth. In the film, you mentioned the home you grew up in was housing secrets. Now, guys, just so you know, I got a sneak peek of his film, his documentary. It's amazing. It's coming out August the 15th. I think that you mentioned that, but I just want you all to know that I got to see it. So I'm really feel very humbled that he shared that with me. But in the film, you mentioned the home you grew up was housing secrets. You discussed feeling duped by your parents, and you alluded to the secrets your parents kept made them happier. Can you elaborate on that fact that you think your parents were happier keeping these very big secrets?
Yes, I would say, first of all, let you know that my parents were big on keeping secrets. And the house, there was always this sense of, you know, there's the old children should be seen but not heard saying that we grew up with. But this was more than that. This was literally a wall that they put. And we always felt there was some kind of something they were holding back, but I had no idea what. I would say it did make them happier because I think they wanted to, you know, project this image that, you know, they were just like every other normal couple, no problem. They blinked their eyes and all of a sudden they were pregnant and everything was good. So I think they liked that. They liked it was almost like a vanity thing. That plus the culture at the time where it was sort of frowned upon for anybody to do such a thing, which today in today's world, it's like everybody, you know, a lot of people do assisted pregnancies, but back then it was definitely a taboo subject. I do think it kept them happy because they were able to stay in their bubble. They were able to stay in their little secure place where, you know what, it happened. Nobody knows about it. It looks like we're normal and there's no problem and everything's fine. And look over there, you know, don't look over here. Everything's fine. So I think they did like that. It just, I think that secret in a way empowered them somehow.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Eric in the chat says too many secrets in that generation. You're right, Eric. That's absolutely correct. Jon, you grew up as the baby in the family.
Still am. I didn't change.
Are you really? Or of all your half siblings, you're still the baby?
No. I just meant the one I was raised with.
Well, that's very true. When the family called you the curious one of your brothers said you were always looking in cabinets and looking for stuff all the time. Do you believe, and this is sort of out there kind of question, but do you believe there was something subconsciously to you that you were, as you were getting older, that you thought maybe that you were searching for something unknown, and that you were looking for that? And then later in your life, as an adult in the film industry also, you were always looking at questions, looking for answers. Your dad, I wanted to say a little bit about your dad. He was not too happy hearing about DNA tests and those kind of things. And he actually, when you mentioned to him that you wanted to take a DNA test, he said not until he died. Well, I think the words he actually said in the documentary, which when you guys watch this, I'll just have to tell you, it's kind of interesting. He says, he's talking to his dad and his dad's kind of figuring out, is he going to take the test or not? And he just says to Jon, piss on my wish. Can you discuss how that made you feel?
Yeah, I'll clarify that a little bit. When I told him, if you don't tell me why you don't want me to take the test, I'm going to take the test. He did the old, fine, piss on my wish. The old Jewish guilt thing, kind of, baby to where he was kind of being a big baby at the time. That's what I thought. I didn't realize there was an even bigger secret behind his words. But to talk about the snooping, I always felt if my parents went out to dinner or out with their friends, which they did a lot, when they were gone, nothing was off limits. I'd start in their bedroom, and I would just search and search. I had no idea what I was looking for. I will tell you one thing that kind of surprised me. It's a little weird, but it's something I noticed because when you're a kid and you're 11, 12, your friends start talking about their parents and, their intimate relationships and whatnot. And, one thing I noticed is there were never any condoms in my dad's house. I mean, that's kind of how far I looked. I was looking under the bathroom cabinets. I was looking in the drawers, the closets, nothing was nothing. It didn't click to me as to why. I just thought it was weird. So I think unconsciously there was something. I always felt that there was something they were not telling me. And so I think, unconsciously, I was on a lifelong scavenger hunt. So when they were out of the house, nothing was off limits. Kudos to them for keeping all documentation and out of my sight.
Yeah, that's an amazing story there. We all on this panel of people here in this, on this Zoom, had different reactions to when we found out about our DNA test results. Some of the common themes I have seen have been anger, shock in various levels, grief. When I think about grief, you know, to me, grief is it's just, it binds you up. And understanding the different ways we feel and how we deal with different circumstances is important. We, you know, and one of the things as an RN and the NPEN group is doing that I have started up, we're looking at those very fascinating levels of where we're at of, you know, when the shock happens, the grief, the total reaction that we have. And one of the kindest things you can do to somebody is just sit with them and listen to them. And sometimes the only words you can say is, I'm sorry for what you're going through. You know, you had this, we're both baby boomers, and we know, you know, there's a baby boomer 1, a baby boomer 2. I had written it down like baby boomer 1 or from 1946 to 54. You and I are in that group of 1955 to 64 of the baby boomer 2. Then there's the Generation X, which is 65 to 80. And then the millennials, 81 to 96. Could you compare where you believe you are in regards to all the shock you had from the DNA results compared to perhaps one of these others, the millennials, for example?
I can speak to my shock. I haven't really spoken to too many millennials who've gone through it. Most of the millennials who go through it usually know, unless it's an affair or something. But if it was a planned pregnancy, most of them tend to know. You know, parents say something. But as far as I think you were asking about my shock, right? Is that what it was?
That's your, yeah, what the impact of that? Yes.
I mean, physically, the first thing I got was butterflies in my stomach, to be honest. The shock was really, I think first was the butterflies in my stomach. I think second was, what the heck are my parents? What were they doing? Why would they keep something like this for me? What else aren't they telling me? Who else knows? You know, there's a certain mistrust of your parents that you have, or at least in my case there was. Props to my brother Eric, who I know who's listening on this. When I first told him about this, he talked me down, because I said to him, Eric, he didn't tell you not to take the DNA test. He didn't tell you not to take the DNA test. He told me not to take the DNA test. You take the DNA test, find out that you have a half sibling, find out why I'm a half sibling, and then ask him why. And Eric's like, there's no way I'm going there. He's like, it's not. He's 92 years old. What is the point at this point in his life? And the next part of the shock was starting to realize this just wasn't just about me. This was about what my parents had gone through also. Look, I can't imagine what it's like in, 1959, 1963, 1958, whenever this all went down. To find out that you're an infertile couple, you're in your early and mid 20s. Back then, they got married a little younger, and you think you have the whole world ahead of you, and then all of a sudden you hit this bump in the road. How do you handle it? And who do you tell? Who do you go to for help? And then I started processing that my dad must have really had, I don't think he had an easy time with this. I don't think he would have said, don't take the DNA test till I'm dead, if it was easy peasy for him. He had to keep this buried down. Did my mom talk to him about it when we weren't at home? Did he talk to his parents about it, or his in-laws, or who knows? Who knows? My cousins are all claiming they knew nothing. And for the most part, I believe them, although there is one who does have a funny look on his face when I talk about it. So maybe he knew something, but you realize that this isn't just about me. This isn't just about me. This was an issue that they had to think about, because it was about them, because we did not exist yet. And so that sort of helped me process a little bit. You realize, I am, I've always be like, geez, what were they thinking? But, at this point, they went through something. This wasn't just a one-way street.
Right.
It was a one-way street for them when they had to make their decision. But, once my brothers came along and I came along, obviously in a perfect world, I wish they would have said something, but they didn't. And that's that.
Well, you know, one of the things I hear a lot in our groups over the years is people feel like an imposter syndrome. You know, you grew up Jewish and you know your donor was Jewish. How did any of that happen to you? Did you feel like an imposter in any way when you looked in the mirror at yourself? I can tell you I did. My identity went through quite a crisis for a number of years. How do you feel about that?
Well, I do feel like there was some kind of an identity crisis because I was very fortunate. I know there's a lot of people out there who never find their donor parent. Mine was on 23andMe, and within 4 days we were talking. But for those days where I didn't know who he was, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out or how I wanted to find out, there is a sense of an imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
You know, there's totally a sense. There's totally a sense of an imposter syndrome, and you do feel like, who am I? You look in the mirror and you think, well, am I Richard and Harriet's kid, or am I Harriet's kid and who? Or, you know, at that point I hadn't tested my mother, so was I even her kid? I mean, so you do look in the mirror. Everybody has an origin story, Alicia. Everybody has an origin story. And you think about it just like being left-handed or having blue eyes. It's part of you and you don't think twice about it. But when you're 54 years old and you find out that you're not exactly who you are, and I'm sure a lot of people in this group can relate to that, it's a thing. And that's the best way I can describe it. It's a thing, you know?
Exactly. You know, in the group, this NPE Life. And by the way, Lisa Cole is on this call, and I just want to put a shout out to her, and her group is called DNA Surprise Support. And we're both RNs. As far as I know, we're the only two RNs that run these kind of groups. There are other groups out there, but we're the only two are registered nurses. And we've done a lot of work with talking through our new group called NPEN about mental health. And I know you told me you went to see a therapist, and because of these lies that came out, you felt like you needed to go see a therapist. You mentioned about feeling like your identity all got shook up. When you called for help, the counselor told you they were not taking on new clients. But as soon as they heard your dilemma, you were asked to come in as soon as possible. This to me was a good sign that therapists knew you needed help right away, and that you who had a new reality, that your old reality was shattered. Can you discuss a little bit about your therapy, what you feel comfortable sharing about, and how important it was for you?
Sure. You know, going to the therapist, I mean, I can usually handle my problems, but this one was a couple of grades above my pay grade here. So I did talk to somebody about it. I felt, what I can tell you is there was a relationship issue with my dad. I want to be very clear, when I made this film, I did not want to make it a spite film. I didn't want to spite my parents. I didn't want to make them out to be bad parents, because they were not bad parents. But there was a boundary, especially with my dad. I know it was with my mom too. You know, she was big on saying it's none of your business. But with him too, there was something we could not put our finger on. There was some distance. He always seemed like he was angry at us. And that came out a little bit in the therapy. Actually came out a lot more. And we kind of came to the conclusion, and I came to a place where, you know, the relationship between me and him, I always thought, well, that's my fault. What am I doing wrong? I must not be good enough. I must not be smart enough to know what the problem is in our relationship, you know? And then when all this came out and we talked through it, and it wasn't but 3 sessions in that we realized that, you know, he's a broken man, or he was a broken man. And so that was very helpful. And then, you know, the weight comes off your shoulders. A lot of people I've spoken to who have this NPE experience, some love their parents, love their dads, and it's wonderful. But there are people who say there was always something about him that we couldn't put our finger on. Sometimes worse, sometimes a lot worse. My case, it wasn't that bad, but it was enough that it tweaked my head a little bit. So that's how it helped.
Well, that kind of leads me into really the last couple of questions I have for you before we go to our audience and let them ask you some questions. You're 4 years in on your discovery. You brought up the word origin, your origin story. How has your origin story shifted, and how doing the film and the work that you are involved with now has become become part of you now, and how you're navigating your own healing through all this? And I'm also interested, how are your brothers doing that you grew up with, and how are the new half siblings? How are all of them impacted with all this? And if you have anything extra to add, any antidote for any of us, please do. I'm sorry, that's a 3-part question.
Yeah, remind me the first part. See, I'm getting old. Can't remember what was the first part.
Well, basically, how doing the film, how that became part of your origin story.
Yeah, I mean, it did. I think working through the film and talking to my donor siblings, particularly those that had weird relationships with their dads, was very helpful to me. It just kind of justified or made concrete what I had learned through the therapy process, that the dads they had issues with this, that helped. Also, working through it, it was great because, again, as I had said earlier, I had all that support from all my donor siblings, my donor dad, and everybody. So that really, really helped a lot. One thing that is interesting about making this movie is I think of it as a character study. And this is where it gets kind of weird, because I kind of had to do a character study of me. And that was definitely a unique experience, but it was also very freeing. And in some ways it was fun, because a lot of the people I used in this film to help me make it were some of my very closest friends who worked in the industry with me. And so I always kept a very positive support group around me. And somehow the universe paid me back, I think, by giving me a very positive vibe from everybody who worked on the film. Even the sociologist I spoke with, Dr. Rosanna Hertz from Wellesley, she was so willing. The only thing that got in the way between me and her was COVID again. But aside from that, I couldn't believe how everybody was just so willing and able to help me tell this story.
That's a huge blessing, because many of us on this call can tell you firsthand the rejection that we got. So much rejection. So being able to tell your story and that you had a positive light on it is incredible, because honestly, they need to be told. I mean, obviously those that have had a lot of rejection, there's a lot of hurt, but hearing your story, and I'm not downplaying your hurt, because I know that must have been quite a shock in your 50s, like it was for me, to find out the man that raised me was not my dad, my biological dad. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I have been really enjoyed our time together talking, this Q&A. We're going to go to the audience, and Sabrina, when you have a moment, you can cut off the recording for this, and you guys can come on board in just a moment. And this recording will be available later in our groups from This NPE Life and NPEN, who has sponsored this Q&A with Jon. So it was really great. It was great to talk to you, Jon. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Please check out the movie. I mean, by all means, it's going to be available everywhere.
Yeah. So we're going to stop recording now.